Well, our subject then for this painting is Dinard in northern France on the coast of Brittany, and a very elegant row of, shall I say, Victorian houses, rumored to be, as I said on Pat Chat the other night, rumored to be an inspiration for Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. You can see where I'm going with this, with the style of those rooftops and the gable windows and so on. Very familiar. And in fact, a little bit over to the left of this scene, there is a promenade Pablo Picasso. All right, very arty place. And there's an Alfred Hitchcock statue with a couple of birds perched on his shoulders in a sort of iconic pose. Yeah, so a nice scene to be had. Thanks very much to fellow member Vixenti for the kind sharing of his image. As you know, I choose or select the painting projects from your wonderful photos, so keep them coming, please. And we cycle around different types of subjects. So I think this is more sort of buildings. I know it's a coastal scene, and we have done a few coastal scenes recently, but there's no water in this one, no reflections, no boats. A lot of buildings and a lot of sky as well. Yes, so elegant architecture to contend with, and if we just zoom into some of these buildings, very steep rooftops, lots of windows, lots of frames, architectural details with the fascia boards, these steep rooftops, the steeples as well. Very complex rooftops, chimneys also. We're going to try and simplify the background houses. Well, almost in the background. Shall I say middle ground? Trying to simplify them, yet trying to keep the character of those buildings. The light is coming from the right-hand side. We thought on Pat Chat the photograph was taken later in the day with the sun coming in from the west and sort of that kind of angle like that. The sky, that's another feature of the scene. Now, I said I'm going to plan to move the cliff top up, so we have a little bit less of the sky, yet still try and get in a lot of that sky, that atmospheric sky with those clouds, mixture of hard and soft edges. So by that I mean, can I try and find a harder edge? Well, that's a kind of hard edge there. Blue, white, and then softer edges. Normally on the sort of underbelly of the clouds, for example, there, you've got the dark cloud and with sort of soft transition into the blue of the sky. Yeah, lots of edges to contend with, hard edges around the sort of silhouette of the rooftops. And then these lovely shapes of light coming down the cliffs. So we've got these cliffs, what would they be? Maybe 50 meters or so above the beach. So at a sort of 45 degree, yeah, what's a sort of 45 degree slope of those shapes of light and dark. And in those shapes, we've got hard and soft edges as well. For example, there's a hard edge there, that little ridge, all right? And then where can I find a soft edge? Well, I guess here, soft edge, a little sort of depression. There's that sweeping staircase coming down from, I guess, from that. This must be one of the wealthiest people on the block, I guess, but that sort of sweeping staircase coming down, but a soft edge on the left-hand side of that shadow. So a mixture of hard and soft edges, a little bit of light touching the beach on the left-hand side. The bay here is, there's a little bay here, and I guess we're kind of at low tide. So there's an expanse of sand there. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got these rocks there. a little promenade above a sort of retaining wall at the back of the beach. That might give us a little bit of perspective to the scene, a little bit of depth as well, a bit of a journey from that right-hand side. I discussed on Pat Chat the inclusion of some figures on the right-hand side. We've got these figures for scale there. I am, on my practice painting, I sort of put in some larger figures than those. And I think I'll stick with that, actually. So larger figures in there, just to get a bit of interest in that bottom right-hand corner. Back to the buildings. We've got 6 buildings here. And I'm going to actually reduce that to 5. In so doing, I'm going to try and not have them evenly spaced, not perfectly spaced, although they are fairly evenly spaced here. My thinking is have the left-hand 3 fairly close together, and then the right-hand 2, again, fairly close, maybe a little bit of a gap in the middle. And this building on the right-hand side here with that sort of light extension, imagine that being moved slightly to the left. Bit of an incline of the top of the cliffs. Look at that angle there. The promenade lower down at the back of the beach is almost level, snakes around to the right. Jagged rocks, bottom right-hand corner. Lots of lights and darks, the very light of the buildings catching the light, bit of light in the cloud, bit of light down here in the bottom left-hand corner, really dark in parts of the cliff over on that right-hand side, this bottom right-hand side as well. Yes, I think that's enough said on the subject. I will try and remember to go back to show the scene to you as I go through the demo. Maybe as something is drawing or I'm waiting for something to happen. Well, let me just see if there's any questions before we start. Materials, I've got Saunders Waterford watercolor paper. This is cold press, medium roughness, and it's 300 grams. In weight, 140 pounds. 15 inches by 11 inches. The paints I'm using are handmade professional quality paints from Mark Jackman in the UK. My more normal palette of colours, I've got neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre. We're using that for a bit of that for the sand. Then spring green, viridian green, cobalt green, then cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red or English oxide, cadmium orange, and cadmium yellow. Across the bottom, I've got here lavender, and then a couple of gouache colors in the bottom right-hand corner there. I will try and describe the colors and color mixing as I go through. Brushes wise, a majority of this painting will be with a mop brush, a medium-sized mop brush. This is a Tintoretto 14007 synthetic mop brush from Tintoretto, and it's got a fairly good point. We're going to need that point for those pointed spires for sure, and some of the hard edges as well. I will also be using a 1/2-inch flat brush as well. All right, this is again a synthetic brush. This is from Raphael. It's a soft aqua brush, and then a medium round synthetic brush from Escoda. That's a Perla. Possibly a little rigger brush as well. Okay, we'll make a start. I'm going to obviously, of course, go through the whole painting process with you, starting with initial drawing. And as I explained, my thoughts are moving the scene up a little bit so that we've got less sky and a little bit more of the beach. I'm going to start by drawing the top of the cliffs and trying to get that angle right as well. So not horizontal, it just goes up a little bit like that, maybe about 10 degrees off the horizontal, something like that. Starting from the left-hand side, I've got an HB pencil here, nothing special, and just trying to get in the main shapes of the cliff. So I'm not really following that cliff top profile exactly. Then the buildings. So starting from the left-hand side, and there's I think this is the largest building down there on that left-hand side. There's that one, and then one next to it. Those trademark spires, and then the next one, this rather ornate, taller building. Again, a little bit of a spire to it. This one, well, a little bit that one. These two have got a lot of light hitting the right-hand side. So that's going to be light, that's going to be dark. Light, dark. This is quite dark, that one. Couple more buildings as we go over to the right-hand side. So a bit of a gap where we've got a pine tree or something like that that is providing a bit of contrast, dark against the light of that wall. So pine tree there, and then I've just got enough space to squeeze in these two on the right-hand side. So a bit of a gap. So the gap there was fairly equal, but then a bigger gap here. And these next to a little bit more sort of squarish. Now, being a little bit closer to us, I need to pay a little bit more attention to these. Let's have another steeple on that one. And then next to it, we've got the right-hand building with that little bit of, I want to try and squeeze in that light, quite ornate extension on that right-hand side. There we go. So less sky than in the photo, but I still get in a few of those atmospheric clouds in there. The next thing I need to think about is the height of the cliff and where the promenade is going to be, which is going to be around about there. Let's have that pathway. It sort of has a few little curves to it as it's following the back of this small bay, and it's so not a perfectly straight line, all right, and then it has a bit more of a curve on this right hand side, so this bay is sort of curved a little bit like that. We can see a little bit more of this path here, and then the rocks going down to the water's edge that way. There's this retaining wall as well at the back of the beach. So that's the bottom of the wall. So the beach is not level. It's got lots of peaks and troughs to it. It looks as if it does go down a little bit here. So this is all, that's going to be quite light in that area. Darker here, light there. Light, of course, coming from that top right corner. Now, I need to get in now some of the prominent slopes on that cliff, just to get them right, and also some figures on this right-hand side. Okay. Well, let's start with this building here. Light hit it, so light hitting that right-hand side. And from there, we've got a shape coming down here of light. There's a terrace. I should imagine there's a few terraces as we come down to the bottom of the cliff. So that's light. Then over here, there's another light area with some very warm, brightly colored rocks exposed there. That's the angle there of that ridge. So light rocks, darker cliffs beyond. Soft edge here. So light, light. Let's get in another light area up here. Now, part of this building has got a cast shadow from this building. But let's just imagine there's this sort of terrace in front of these buildings, and they too are catching a bit of light coming down. Just mainly the top bits of the cliff catching a bit of light. Over on the right-hand side, I can just detect a bit of a slope there of some foliage. There's some exposed, there's like a retaining wall here, or exposed brickwork. Yeah, it's just a little bit lower than that one, but that'll do. And some figures on the rocks here. Some figures on the rocks, so. There's one figure. And so these figures are generally looking maybe into the scene. And let's have another one here. And then a smaller one there. A little bit bigger than in the photo, but I think if I did them the same size in the photo, they're going to be lost in that part of the composition, because it is quite dark there, and you've got to, when you see the photo, you've got to zoom into it, and you'll be able to see a figure walking here, or a couple of figures close to the rocks, there's these two Saturn rocks. They're too small. They're too small. I think I just need to use a bit of artistic license to make them a bit larger. I'll put in a bit of cross-hatching just to, because I'm going to go in quite dark in that area. I want to make sure they still sort of stand out there. Just want to ensure that I've got this building correct. In fact, that spire on that one has got a little bit of a flat top to it. It's not a pointed spire like that one is there, and there's one there. In fact, there's a couple there. I'm inventing one over here, and then there's a flatter top one there. That flat top's more like the, well, in fact, that one there's more like the sort of Psycho house. If you look up on Google, the building used in the Psycho film, pretty spooky. All right. There, ooh, there's a bit of a terrace there catching the light. Then a bit of a tree obscuring the building, the second building from the left. I think that's about it. The trick is knowing when to stop mucking about and doing all the drawing and just getting in the essence of the scene, getting right in your own mind where the light's going to be, where the dark shadows, the shady parts of these buildings are going to be. So generally it's going to be the shady part is of course, the front, but on the right-hand side, little bits of light. And then the light coming on down to the down the cliff to the beach. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't need to do much to the rocks. They're all sort of craggy granite type rocks, looks to me. Typical rocks that you'll see in that part of the world. And indeed over in Cornwall, on the opposite side of the channel. Not drawing in the clouds, but imagining these clouds, they've got quite a nice pattern. They're at that sort of angle, then slightly steeper. And there's a little bit of a change in that angle as we go over the scene. All right, on to some painting then. Let me just see if there's any questions. No. All right. I will now start painting the initial wash. As I discussed on Pat Chat, my plan with the sky is to put some clear water over most of the sky area, down to the houses. And then as that is damp, not particularly wet, just a little bit damp, then drop in the cloud color in a sort of random fashion, doing it quite quickly, not messing about, not overworking it. And then add in the sky. And then adding in the sky, try and get in those hard edges on the tops of the clouds as we go. Just a few little hard edges, but then the soft edges at the bottom of the clouds. Then I will come further down the scene, get in the base color of the warm color of the buildings, and coming down the building work, the retaining walls as we're coming down the cliff, the rocks as well, the sand. I'm basically covering the whole scene, apart from some key areas of light, like here, like some of the lighter parts of the clouds. That's the plan. So mop brush then, and clear water. clear water, and the side of the brush I find is easiest. I could go over this area with a sponge just to speed up things, but this should be all right. Not too much water, but just enough to make it damp. There we go. A cloud mixture now. And there was a little bit of yellow in the clouds, but essentially it's a sort of cool, a bluey grey, I would say. And my choice for that is a little bit of, let's just mix something up here, a little bit of ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt umber, where you can experiment with other color combinations. And just check my fingers, the sort of moisture content of the top there. I think it's all right. Ultramarine blue then, and a little bit of burnt umber. It will dry lighter. We'll go around, so I will add in a little bit of yellow ochre. Need to go around the building, that light building. Continue on. So I'm just sort of stabbing the paper as my technique. A little bit lighter with the clouds on that left-hand side. Now for the sky color. So make sure my brush is clean, and then, oops. Make sure my brush is clean, and a little bit of cobalt blue. In fact, this cobalt blue might be just what I need. I sometimes add a bit of cerulean to it, but I think this blue will be okay. And then from the underbelly of the clouds, try and get in that hard edge there. Use the fingertips just to move things around a bit. And up here as well, we're getting a bit of a hard edge. Bit of a hard edge, top of the clouds. And then a little bit there. And come down to the horizon. Around these buildings. Keep it fairly light on that left-hand side. And just need a little bit of color in there because some of that will show behind the pine tree. If you do want a little bit of lightness to the clouds, if they've gone a bit too dark, then we can still lift off with a damp brush just a little bit here and there, but essentially just try and get it down very quickly in one. Now for the buildings, where we're going to go warmer. And for that, I'm going to use a little bit of this light red, English oxide, a little bit of yellow ochre as well, and then just get in a base color for these buildings. A lot of where I'm painting now will be actually in the shade. So for example there, a lot of that's going to be in the shade and the rooftops. Come down. Basically cover the whole scene with this color. We're going to be going over this with the foliage for the shrubs coming down and the darker shadows, but this is just to cover up the paper. Get in another bit of cadmium orange. And this building here. In fact, I need a bit of sky in there. I could actually get in another dark tree in there. Come down. I can go a bit darker on this right-hand side because this will be in the shade, in the shadows. Try and vary some of the colors, warmths, and the variety of colors in this area as well, which will show when we put in the darker shadows and the foliage around it. So I've just picked up a bit of cadmium orange there just to make some of it a little bit more interesting. Now the beach, I'm going to go in with a bit of some gouache here. This is Naples Yellow Light Gouache, but if you haven't got that, a bit of yellow ochre and a bit of white paint, Chinese white or something like that, would be a sort of similar thing to do. Bit of yellow ochre, bit of white, and get that light in there. This here, I'm still covering this up. A lot of this will be in that dapple shade, that soft shadows. And I'm using this sort of brush technique to get in some subtle variations of intensity of this color. And then this bottom right corner, well, I can pick up a bit of this blue. This is all going to be rocks here. So I can pick up a bit of this cloud. Color in that bottom right corner. All right, so that's step number 2 done, the wash, covering over everything apart from those areas that are going to be kept bright, the bits of the cloud there, trying to get that soft edge, and then the hard edge with the sky. So just let that dry a bit. The next step from here will be to add in the darks with the shady parts of the buildings, the rooftops, and then these shadowy shapes coming down. Do a bit of negative painting, shadowy shapes down the cliffs and then over the beach there. Now, this is taking quite a long time to dry, so I might just speed up things with a hairdryer. Just excuse me. Okay, that's nice and dry. Just let it cool down a bit, the actual surface there. Darks then, starting with the rooftops, and I need a good brush with either a good edge and or a good point to it. So this brush should be all right. It is a fairly old brush now. I've had this several months and it's used most days. So the point might be a tiny bit warm, but that should be okay. Hopefully you can see that point okay. That should give a nice edge and a nice point to some of these rooftops. Starting off with the color of the rooftops, that's sort of slate. I'm not sure what the building material is, but it looks like a sort of bluish slate color. So I'll go in with the ultramarine blue again, a bit of burnt sienna. Now the ratio of water to paint here, there's less water than what I've just been using. So it's slightly thicker in consistency. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, trying to get that sort of roof tile color. And then check my point on the brush. Being a right-handed, I'll start on the left-hand side here. Also make sure this is all dry as well. Start on the left-hand side and get in some of these, the silhouette of some of these rooftops. As I'm doing this, I could just leave little bits of the paper exposed, which could be some rooftop windows. So that's almost the roof of the left-hand one completed. So actually make this left-hand side a little bit stronger, and then second one in, rooftops. And now I need to be careful with this one. This is got to have a good point to it. And make it symmetrical as well. That's where the drawing, the right kind of width and symmetrical as well. There we go. And then the Alfred Hitchcock house, Psycho house. Check my point. A little bit of a flat top to it. Comes down. There we go. And then the next one along. So in the source photo, I've missed out the third from the right. A few little dormer windows or gable windows. We're going to have another spire here. So very carefully try and make that symmetrical. Good point to it. And then the right-hand one. I think all these houses, they've got the similar color of rooftops. And a couple of windows there as well. Down to then the shady parts of the walls on these buildings and a warm, shadowy mix. So that light red again, a little bit of ultramarine blue. That should be all right. Let's just do a little bit of a test. A little bit warmer. So this left-hand building, a little bit is a little bit of the building facing that way is catching some of the light. And then coming along, we'll get a bit of a tree on the front there, hiding a bit of that building. Right, get this edge correct, nice and vertical. There's a little bit of a line there. Okay, continue over. And that building, let's make this one a little bit different. Not so dark, bit of cadmium orange in there. And the front of this building has got a sort of conservatory or something on the front there. Some shadows that are just reaching the sort of bottom of this extension. And there's a bit of that extension. These windows are too bright. Those are as well. There we go. Now for the rocks and the cliff coming down to the beach. I need to go green now. There's a lot of shrubbery and different types of plants clinging on for dear life on this cliff. So let's mix up something green. I've got that spring green here, but mostly viridian green, I reckon. It's a cooler green. And a little bit of burnt umber in that, just to warm it up a bit. Starting from the left-hand side then, and we can go a little bit darker later on if we think it's not dark enough. This is where I'm doing a bit of negative painting now to define the profile of some of the cliffs coming down, particularly here. This is the first one. And as I'm coming down here, I need to go a bit darker. So I'm picking up some neutral tint and some ultramarine blue to go a bit darker. Down there, up to the edge of that sharp rock. Connect the building with the foliage as well. So I use my fingertips there just to, that's still damp, use the fingertips just to merge the two into each other just a little bit. Now connect with the next one along, the tree that's obscuring a lot of that building. And it sort of comes down over that right-hand side and then connects with this building. Okay, now there's a hard edge here going to a soft edge. Let's get in the greenery first of all. of the foliage there. So this is some smaller sort of shrubs or heather or whatever coming down the cliffs there. Still try and keep that hard edge. I can actually tidy that up later on with a flat brush, but now going with a darker hard edge to define the profile of these terraces coming down where that sweeping staircase was. So something darker, cobalt blue, neutral tint. There's my soft edge. Down to the pathway. Use my fingertips just to get a bit of a soft edge. All right, and that's going to be the sort of plan going over, really, this sort of mixture of the different shades of green to try and depict the foliage coming down the cliff, and then these darker values for the recesses where it's very, very dark, and trying to think about the edges at the same time. Right, up to this area here. Oh, let's get in the tree. Burnt umber, viridian green. Actually, a little bit of neutral tint just to get that instant darkness. Not too dark. I don't want it sort of black, really. Viridian green, neutral tint. Keep mixing. I know it's only a small area, but let's just get it right. And it's sort of fairly top heavy. These pine trees, they have all the growth at the top, and then fairly sparse as we go, and almost like horizontal layers of foliage as well. Now, this is an important bit here where I'm defining the right-hand edge of I'll call it the Alfred Hitchcock, the Alfred Hitchcock house. Right, a bit more foliage down the bottom, connect with the cliff top. I'll get in a few little thin trunks later on, but just not too much of the sky showing through. And then let's connect with this house here just a little bit. Now on with the cliffs, a little bit of brighter green there, just on the right-hand side. And then the darker green. Up to this other area of light. Fingertips again. Connect the dark shadows of the cliff with the building. And further on down. neutral tint, burnt umber. Some of these rocks. Connect that with each other. And then going again with a harder edge. Just in there. There's a little bit of sand there. No. Burnt sienna, neutral tint. There's a sort of retaining wall just below that house. Try and connect these two with each other, these two buildings. And then a mixture of this foliage, spring green, Virgin green, and then lower down it turned into more of a rocky material. So let's just change that to ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. Ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of cobalt blue. There's that sort of retaining wall, the top of the far side of that little pathway over these figures. Not too dark. And now the right-hand side of the pathway. And then now for the shadow on the beach, which is a warm shadow. It's not as dark as the cliffs. So I think a little bit of alizarin crimson and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. Alizarin crimson, bit of ultramarine blue. And then in a similar way to how I painted the beach in the first place, that sort of dabbing technique, just giving a little sort of subtle variations of tone and intensity of the wash. So there's going to be a retaining wall above this and a few more darks over there. Maybe a little bit of cool in the mix as well. Bottom left-hand corner, come up to the edge of the rocks. There we go. And some of these edges will be a little bit softer. I can use a little paper towel or tissue just to lift off. There is a little bit of light. I'm not sure whether there's bands of damp and dry sand on this beach, but there's just little areas where it's a bit lighter. A bit like that. That should be okay. There we go. All right, this needs some more detail to it. I'll do that in a minute with a flat brush. Let me just see if there's any questions. Ooh, no, don't think there is. All right, need to get in a dark tree in there. Neutral tint, Frisian green. We'll have another sort of cedar type tree just in that gap, and up to the two buildings. There we go. Perhaps just continue this over on the right hand side as well for continuity. There we go. Just a bit. There we are. All right, I will now, I think this is drying quite nicely. We need to get in a bit more definition to the terraces here, the tiers coming down, and some of these edges. And then I need to do the retaining wall, need to do the rocks, need to do the figures. Yep, so flat brush time. Right, flat brush, and I could have actually used the mop brush because this has got quite a good flat edge to it. For example, there. So that edge there is going to be fairly similar in profile to this 1/2 inch flat brush, but I just find the slightly stiffer, sort of stiffer nature of this brush is a little bit better for what I'm going to do. So I'm now going to try and emphasize some of these edges and just getting a bit of texture to some of these terraces, just to that some of these terrace walls, these retaining walls, they're a little bit curved, and the left hand side is a little bit darker than the right hand side. So I need to just get in a little bit of that that definition. And something dark. Let's mix my darks up here. So a neutral tint, cobalt blue. Honestly, it's just something dark, not grey. Try and inject some colours into it. There's a little bit of a peak there that's got some colour, some darkness to it there, and then coming down here, there's a hard edge there, and it continues on down at that sort of angle, and then it sort of gets a bit steeper. Hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. Cobalt blue, trying to get in some cooler shade in there. that angle is trying to emphasize the general angle of the slope, where it's definitely that sort of 45 degree over there. And then it gets a little bit steeper here. And then the side profile on the right-hand side, that again goes almost 45 degrees. All right, that's okay there. Let's get a bit more definition to the other side of the pathway. And then define those terraces a bit more. And some soft shade on some of these walls here. And on this wall as well. And then a little bit here. There's some foliage or something growing up there. There's a little bit of some very dark shadow there. And then shade. Let's do a little bit of shade here where there could be, again, another wall. Right, coming over, we're halfway there. Now, just above here, there's some darker terracing. So we're creating some strong lines, I think, here, which just adds a bit more interest to it. In here, that's quite shady in there. And a little bit of dark shadow there. And then nearly there. And then up the side here. Not too detailed, go quite loose on that right-hand side. All right, I still will add a little bit more detail into here you can see some architectural details of the steps maybe in little holes and cracks in the rock, but that should be all right. Next, the retaining wall now at the back of the beach to define that pathway, and we'll come over to the right hand side, and then I will do the rocks, a dark sort of, again, a sort of granity color for those rocks, and then drop in those figures. Back to my mop brush for this, and that wall at the back is going to be a sort of, well, it's almost the same darkness as it's the same value as the shady side of these buildings, roughly. So a coolish grey. There you are. We're starting to see a little bit of that pathway now. Perhaps it's a bit narrower on that left-hand side. Come over to the middle. Connect with the beach, the shadow of the beach. It's too dark. Yeah, a little bit too dark, that. So the flat edge of this brush, there's that little tiny bit of a beach there behind the pathway. And then curving around to meet this right-hand side. Just need to add a bit more water to that. There. So just a few little variations in tonal value. Some areas quite darker than others. There's some rocks and bits and pieces on that very left-hand side. Now, these foreground rocks in the bottom right corner, they're quite dark. They look a little bit darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. So keep with my ultramarine blue, bit of burnt sienna, and start in the middle here and get these sort of very sharp, craggy top to them. Actually go quite dark for the very top. Nearly there. Reaching the figures. Okay, so up to the figures we need to go a bit more horizontal to give them a sort of platform to be standing on. Again, quite dark at the top. But then go a little bit lighter as we come down. I'm going to use a little bit of lavender here. To get that light sort of rock color. I think lavender is very effective for rocks or boulders in the shade. I'll go in later on with some of the cracks with maybe my rigger brush. That might be quite good for creating those cracks between the rocks. But essentially, that is it for that area. Figures then. Figures. I'll keep with this brush. I could go to a smaller brush, but I'll stick with this one. And something quite dark, not black, again, not black, but dark. So ultramarine blue and neutral tint. Try and get a good point to my brush for this. And now, without trying to smudge my work in the bottom right corner, starting with this left hand figure. There. Connect with the rocks. Middle figure, maybe a little bit taller. A little bit taller. I can just about see my pencil work. And slightly different leg configuration. And then lastly, slightly smaller figure. There on the right. And then if I think it's all right, just leave it. Make these figures quite solid. Okay. Nearly there. To strengthen some of these terraces with this brush, what I've got, you can see I get quite a fine point with this. Let's get in some darker little bits of darkness in the rocks. Quite dark or darker over there. Quite dark there. There's a little bit of darkness here. Looks like there's some boulders or something just below the wall in some places. And you can see, as I did with that flat brush, I can still get quite a good dry brush mark going over I'm defining now these tiers coming down the cliff. A few little lines in the sand, not too many. Come back to those rocks in a minute. Let's get into some more detail for the buildings. They do need a few windows and just a few lines to define what's going on. Maybe a little bit of white gouache for some of the white windows. I'm not going to, there's a lot of white framed windows there. And I think if I went in where those buildings are and the distance from us, if I went in with white frames, it's just going to look a bit too over the top, and it'll stand out too much. So little to medium round synthetic brush, pick up something in the palette, something dark. I really don't know what this is. And then we are going to define some of the windows a little bit. And some of the shadow behind the gable, the dormer windows. Maybe some windows on that side. And then windows there. There's some windows here. Just a few little lines to suggest some of the architectural details of these buildings. Now this one's got some darker bits on that left-hand side. Maybe some of these spires, they've got a bit of a darkness on that left-hand side. That's just going to make them stand out just a bit more by putting in that darkness. Got to be so careful here not to ruin the symmetry of those spires. Let's put another one in there. Right, back to this building and some windows. Get some windows on the right-hand side. And then the right-hand building. Some dry brush marks to just strengthen up some of the feeling of the gradient of the cliffs on that right-hand side. So there's hardly any water at all in this brush now. Down to the cliff. This needs working a little bit more. That's that sweeping staircase coming down. Can I, even though I didn't draw it in, can I suggest maybe, this could be a bit too much detail, but can I suggest just a few little steps in there? There we are. That needs to be a bit darker in there on that left-hand side of that retaining wall. That's going to strengthen that up a bit. Got to be careful not to put in too much detail into this. There's a sort of detail to the top of this terrace. It's going to be around about there. There's little lines like that. Some tree trunks just to connect that foliage up. I'm just really looking around the photo now for extra inspiration, just to see if I've missed anything, just to just create the essence of those rocks there. Maybe just a few little lines on the beach where there could be footprints or something like that. I mean, the more I look at it, the more details I see, and the danger is I'm going to go ultra tight, which is not me. I'm more sort of loose, as you know, and yeah, I think that's it. Right, I need to get in some of the dark crevices, the cracks in this rock here, and then it's out with the old white gouache, just for some final touches, and I think we're almost done there. Right, so I could use a little rigger brush for this. Again, in these rocks, there's a mixture of hard and soft edges. A nice crack coming down here. Going over those lighter rocks. There, I think I've defined those enough. Down that bottom right-hand corner. I think the base of those rocks with my flat brush, I just need to define the bottom of those just a little bit more, not to conflict with the figures there, but just at the base, just a little bit darker. There we go. All right, white gouache. So I'm going to use a rigger brush here. This is a brush from Lebenson. It's a handmade rigger brush, and some white gouache, which I have some in the bottom right corner. I'm not sure if you can, it might be a little bit off shot, just here in the bottom right hand corner. I should have moved my camera over a little bit. I do apologize. Now this gouache is in my palette, and it does dry up a lot more than the watercolor tube paint. So I've got to just be patient, please. I've got to sort of work it a bit to loosen it and get it to the right consistency. Not too wet, not too dry. And I think I'm nearly there, actually. Yeah, this should be all right. So just a few places where I want to put in a few little white windows. There we are, just a few little windows in there. And then there's, I said at the beginning I wasn't going to do all the fascia boards, but here I am painting fascia boards. Actually, that does need to be a bit wetter, more water. Keep mixing. Just check the brush. There. And then the Alfred Hitchcock house. If you just think the impression of some white windows and little bits of detail. I think that's enough. And then next one along. What can we do with these windows? Just a few little blobs of white, and then this one with the lovely conservatory on the front. And oh, figures need to just, I know they're in the shade, but let's just make them stand out a tiny bit more with a little bit of highlighting. So the light coming from the right, just a tiny bit, not too much, tiny bit on their heads, perhaps shoulders there, this one, and this one, like that. Just makes them stand out a tiny bit more. That is probably about it. The danger with this smaller brush is I'm spotting more detail. Hopefully you can still hear me all right. It's pouring down with rain here. We've had so much rain in the UK recently. April 2024, and ooh, that rooftop there needs to be a bit. so much rain here. But I know other parts of the world, we can't complain, other parts of the world are in more trouble than us. Not only with the weather. Let's make this one a little bit with perspective. Yeah, not ideal, but that looks a bit tidy from a perspective point of view. Quick review of what I've done. Do I put in those steps leading down to the beach? There we are. I think I'm done. That pathway there might be a little bit too wide, but it's all right. So hopefully it gives a feeling of that sort of sweeping curve of that side of this little bay. If you look it up on Google, it's one of the smaller plages, smaller beaches to the left of the central Dinard area. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I'm very much looking forward, those of you on Patreon, very much looking forward to seeing your paintings. Just a quick review then of mine. I'm fairly pleased with it. I could have gone in some softer edges on the tops of the darker clouds, for example, there and there. But it's all right. I've got the hard edge of the sky against those clouds, and that kind of pattern, those clouds. I think I've captured the character of those buildings, kept it to 5, not the 6. Thinking about the contrast of light and dark as well. Moving the trees around. We can always move trees around just to suit us, but getting those dark trees in there just to create a bit more of a contrast. And then working at the cliff tops, trying to get the form of the terraces coming down, the angle of the slopes there going over, a little bit of lightness of the pathway, retaining wall, the shadow going across here. That's actually that actually there could be a little bit softer, that edge there. But these almost a dappled shade on the beach, then this dark, massive granity rock on the right hand side and some figures over here. Perhaps those figures I could put in. Let's get in. One of them maybe has some, using that lavender here, or the same sort of principle. Maybe just see if lavender works in there for that figure. And while we're at it, maybe some flesh color as well. No, not too much detail. So I want the main focal point to be around about there, and these lovely shapes of light coming down the hill. Yeah, thanks for watching. I will give you further instructions on Patreon, probably in the morning now, for those of you submitting a critique. And remember, even if you're not on a critique level, we do want to see your paintings. If you're on a lower level, don't worry, I want to see your paintings, so post them up there on the gallery. Let me just see if there's any final messages here. John, I'm on a beach in France, at least in my mind's eye. Thanks, Sandy. Sandy says, ruined a good sheet of paper, though. Oh, dear. Right. Yes, it's actually pouring down now. Hopefully you can still hear me. It's unbelievable. I'm going to go outside and have a look in a minute. Right. So thanks very much, those of you on here live, for watching, sitting through it. I hope it was okay for you. And good luck, everyone, with your paintings. and I will, yeah, just bear with me till the morning, and I'll get a YouTube version for you as well, which I will make with the YouTube video. I can edit that, and I can actually insert the source photo in the video at certain points, just so you've got that as a refreshment. Okay. Right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day, or Marilyn enjoying Thursday. Thanks very much, and I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.